is that there was a protest over the film that he joined later, trying to sort of break it up, that he later went into the compound to help rescue some Libyan guards who were trapped there. I should say I don't find his account of his own presence there to be particularly convincing. It doesn't mesh with many other witnesses I've talked to, guards who were inside the compound as well as others who watched from the outside.
Doesn't he say something along the lines of this was a peaceful protest, the guards fired on them first, and then they just accidentally found their weapons inside the compound and picked them up and started firing?
No, that's not what he says. He does say that the shooting started with the guards inside the compound firing on the peaceful demonstrators outside. And then he says that some militiamen started firing in the air to disperse the crowd. He says that at some point, clearly, the people outside attacked the mission. There's no doubt about that, and he doesn't deny it. But he adds that when it was all done and the Americans were chased out of the compound, he asserts, without any evidence, that the attackers found weapons, guns with silencers and explosives inside the compound. So he's trying to assert that it wasn't just a diplomatic compound; it was a center of subversion or espionage.
Ah, so the weapons that he's saying that these attackers found, he's not suggesting that they were using them and then posing with them. He said that this was just evidence that this was no diplomatic mission. Is that it?
Yeah, that's right. You got to keep in mind that in Benghazi right now, there are weapons everywhere. There's a lot of little militias or big militias with plenty of AK-47s and truck-mounted artillery and rocket-propelled grenades. So it's not that hard to muster those things up and stage an attack like this.
All right, David Kirkpatrick, great reporting live in Libya for us in Benghazi. In fact, stay safe while you continue to navigate there. So this big question remains. Who knew what? And who knew what when? And if there is someone who does know, is anyone being held accountable at this point? And where are we in the investigative process into the Benghazi attack? Do we deserve to know, or does this have to be carried out in secret? That's why I want to bring in the Ambassador Nicholas Burns right now. He's the former U.S. Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, also former ambassador to NATO. Ambassador Burns, you just heard what David Kirkpatrick was reporting, the kind of access he had to this suspected ringleader, Ahmed Abu Khattala. The two of them were sipping a frappe on a patio. Clearly, this man is not in custody, and there are plenty of witnesses who spoke with David Kirkpatrick swearing he is one of the ringleaders. How on earth is he not in custody?
Well, Ashley, that's the responsibility of the Libyan authorities. The United States does not have any capacity to arrest people in Libya or to act as a police force. The Libyan authorities are sovereign. They have the responsibility to find these people. Obviously, I'm sure the United States government would help them if we can. But the problem is Libya, after Gaddafi, does not have a strong national police force or a strong national army. It is replete with militias, and that's the security environment in which our diplomats have to work and have to protect themselves in Tripoli as well as in other places.
Mr. Ambassador, are you telling me that these new Libyans in control are akin to Keystone cops, or are you telling me these Libyans don't give a damn what we want?
No, I didn't say either of those things. The Libyan authorities actually are quite friendly with the United States. They had free and fair elections this past summer. A moderate group of people, not extremists, were elected. But the problem is, in Libya, as well as in Egypt and Tunisia, these moderate governments are now being assaulted by much more radical forces, some of them armed. And obviously, that's part of the problem with what happened in Benghazi and the murder of Ambassador Stevens and his colleagues. So I do think you ought to focus your attention now on the Libyan authorities and what they need to do to bring these killers to justice.
I don't understand this. I mean, if we have David Kirkpatrick of the New York Times sitting down with a guy who has witnesses saying he's responsible, and there's no one in Libya who can, say, muster some kind of negotiating process between the varying militias there to bring him in for even questioning, just questioning. He hasn't been questioned yet. That, to me, says Keystone cops or we don't care. I don't know where the ground is in between. Explain it.
Well, listen, I can't explain everything that's happening in Libya, Ashley. I'm not there. But I would say this. It is the responsibility of the Libyan government to marshal enough strength and to take down some of these militias and disarm them in order to reassert control over their own country. That's number one. Number two, President Obama said the morning after the attacks that he would pursue justice. And the United States would try to bring these people to justice. And I think the president has a very impressive record of going after terrorist groups, specifically al-Qaeda on the Afghan-Pakistan border, also in Yemen. So I think the United States government obviously wants to do the right thing here and is intending to do that, but it's a very difficult situation where, in effect, the Libyan government and the United States are operating in a lawless environment in Libya itself. Okay, so then the Libyan National Congress told us a couple of weeks ago that they had 50 people in custody that they were asking questions, they were investigating, and then we never heard a word after that. Should we expect to hear a word? Should we expect to ever have follow-up on that? Or, as I was leading into you, I suggested, is this the kind of process that we're at where we are on a need-to-know basis, and we are not supposed to know what's going on? In fact, there's so much diplomatic sensitivity here, it would be damaging if we knew what was going on. No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think the Obama administration is obviously pressing and pushing the Libyan government to pursue this investigation, and the United States government and the American people have a right to know what happened in Benghazi, and those answers have to come from Libya, also, of course, from those investigating this attack. But I think actually this whole situation has been overly politicized, and the real issues are here. There's two of them. How can we defend our embassies against any further possible attacks? And for that, we need full funding from both Republicans and Democrats in the Congress for embassy security. That's number one. And number two, we have to find out what went wrong that night in Benghazi, and Secretary Clinton has quite appropriately ordered a full review of that evening and of embassy security. I think that's where the focus should be of our debate, not on these ancillary questions. And frankly, this situation is being politicized in the presidential campaign, and as someone who served in both Republican and Democratic administrations as a career diplomat, I find that very distasteful. We ought to really focus on protecting our own people. Without question, I agree with you, but you do have to admit it is so offensive to see people like this thumbing their noses at us at a time when we have 4 murders that need investigating and prosecuting, and we don't seem to be getting anywhere with ample evidence from the crime scene. Well, I agree with you. When I read that New York Times report, I was furious at this Libyan militia person who seemed to be very cavalier in talking about the murder of our diplomats. You can imagine, I think that's how all Americans would react. But I would urge you to consider, this is not the direct responsibility of the United States government. This is the responsibility of the Libyan government. The United States government doesn't have any representatives in Benghazi right now because the consulate has been closed following the terrorist attacks. We have our embassy in Tripoli, of course. So I really think, rather than point responsibility for this at the Obama administration, we ought to be asking the Libyan government to do more. Heck yeah. This is a government that we facilitated, to say the very least. Ambassador Burns, thank you. It was great to talk to you. I do appreciate your insight. Thank you. So this is obviously, you heard what the ambassador had to say. You heard what David Kirkpatrick had to say. This is going to be a huge topic of discussion.